Oh, hello there, gentle viewers. Buffy the Vampire Slayer was a series that really helped breathe new life into the undead. It was a show that followed a high school girl who just so happened to be the chosen one, a supernatural, natural being equipped with taking on hordes of hell. She was super strong, super fast, and super deadly. Buffy teams up with her school librarian and a fluctuating team of friends to stop whatever new big bad is threatening an apocalypse. Now that might sound a little goofy in concept, and, well, it was in execution as well, but the show was a hit, legitimizing vampires years before Twilight would come around and put a stake in their heart. It's honestly one of the greatest vampire shows ever created, and much more importantly, led to the creation of an even better vampire series, Angel. We'll get into that at some point, I hope. I really hope. While in my opinion the show always had some problems, sometimes the metaphors were a little too on the nose and could come off as stupid. In the earlier seasons, the stuntmen were painfully obvious. The show would introduce and write off characters at the drop of a hat. All of that was easy to look past because of how great the series could be more often than not. It always managed to have a new story to tell, and a new innovative way of telling it. Introducing new characters, bringing back older characters. You never knew what it would do next. It was highly entertaining television. Honestly, I'm really underselling it here. But that's not what this video is about. Today we're here to answer the question, when did Buffy the Vampire Slayer die? Where did it all go wrong? Well, in my opinion, the show definitely saw a decline following Season 3, which was by far the show at an all-time high. It has some of the greatest episodes the series ever had to offer. Episodes like The Wish, Band Candy, Doppelgangland, and the Graduation Day 2-part finale. And that's just naming some of them. In terms of quality, this season had it in quantity. It was the debut of Fate, a vampire slayer gone rogue who plays both friend and foe to the protagonist. And it was also the last season where we saw the vampire with a soul, Angel, as a main character. In my opinion, the show never reached that height again. Of course, this is an unfair and unreasonable height to ask the show to ever achieve twice. Nevertheless, the fall from grace wasn't gradual. It was a swift decline. The following season is considered to be one of the show's worst seasons. The show took a slightly different turn in terms of creative direction, and I think it was a gamble that didn't exactly pay off. The initiative was admittedly one of the goofiest things the show ever tried to do. A secret military service sent to research demons as the backdrop of a modern retelling of Frankenstein? Who asked for this? It was all just a very strange choice. And when something feels out of left field for Buffy the Vampire Slayer, a show seemingly about vampires but also takes on werewolves, demons, and everything in between, then you know that you stepped out of the boundaries of good taste. I have mixed feelings on it personally, but I think it's safe to say that it was a low point for the show at one point in time. I think it really speaks volumes when the one part of the season that fans remember fondly is the series finale, which had nothing to do with the season-long narrative. Season 5 also had its issues. The big bad of the season was an over-the-top theatrical goddess who inhabited the body of a man. Despite how camptastic and corny Season 5 could be, I can't deny that it also had some of the most impactful moments in the show, including an incredible season finale that, in my opinion, should have been a series finale. Not to mention the episode The Body, which realistically depicted a real-life death, a true tragedy that's universally understood. She didn't fall prey to some otherworldly influence, but instead due to natural causes, showing that even with all the powers in the world, not everyone is capable of being saved all the time. Illness, disease, old age, all of these real-life issues are still at play in this fictional universe. They just now come with the additional baggage of potential witches and hellspawn. Once again, outside of the season's main story, there were some pretty impressive episodes. I mean, this is the season that introduced Dawn, which, you know, actually may be a point against it.
You don't belong here.
Stop. Mom, Buffy, Tara, wah.
But truthfully speaking, Buffy the Vampire Slayer died when Buffy the Vampire Slayer died. Again, in the Season 5 finale, Buffy's sister's blood is needed in order to kickstart a world-ending merge between Hell and Earth. But Buffy realizes that she carries the same blood as Dawn, and is able to sacrifice herself to end the end of the world and save the fate of her friends. It's a selfless sacrifice that speaks volumes about the character, bringing a beautiful arc to a close. Hints were dropped leading up to this episode in hindsight. What wound up being the end of the season really should have been the end of the show. As a matter of fact, at one point in time, it was written as such. It would have been the perfect send-off, the logical closure point that would have perfectly preserved this piece of art. Buffy dies the way that she lived, a hero. Which is the note that one should look to leave on. Even past her, the rest of the characters seem to have a sense of finality and a new direction to be taken in. Buffy had already asked Spike to look after her sister. Xander proposed to Anya at the start of this episode, securing a future together, and Tara, who had been stuck in a magic-induced daze for the entire season, finally snaps out of it. This could have very well been the end of the line. As a matter of fact, I would argue that if you stopped watching the show here, you'll probably appreciate it more in the long run. Unfortunately for the show, it was a major moneymaker. So creative integrity was thrown out the window so they can literally and metaphorically resurrect the corpse of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. The show and the show's main star would return for season 6, and things would never be the same again. The following season is seen as the absolute worst season the show ever put together. Buffy's brought back to life within the first 2 episodes, completely neglecting the weight and importance of the previous season's finale. Mind you, at this point in time, this was already a recycled plot. The first season of the show also ended with the character dying and then coming back to life. So this was already a tired trope. Seeing Buffy defy death after succumbing to it not once but twice really lowered the stakes in all of this. There was no real threat. Even if Buffy died, there's nothing to ever say that she'd stay dead. The show didn't kill Buffy, they killed death itself. They destroyed consequence in their fictional universe. The fact that she was brought back twice also makes it feel a little implausible that they couldn't have just resurrected everyone who had passed on the show since. If Buffy can come back, then why not Joyce? Why not Miss Calendar? Why not Vampire Henchman number 4? It's an exaggeration, but you see my point. Buffy returns to Earth resentful of being resurrected. She was pulled from her happy ending in heaven, spending time with her lost loved ones, to come back and serve the needs of Earth. That's actually a pretty compelling story, but the show's way of going about telling us this tale was nothing short of awful. Buffy's characterization took a major hit this season. When she first comes back from the dead, she's shook from the experience, and that takes an episode or 2 to shake off. But when she does come to her senses, her friends sense that there's something still wrong. At one point, Buffy's even tricked into rounding up her closest friends and family and sacrificing them in favor of her sanity, believing them all to be some sort of delusions that she conjured up that now need to be purged. She ties all of her closest kin up in her basement and almost allows them to be fed to a demon. Kind of a far cry from the selfless savior from the last season. And it's around this time that Buffy starts hooking up with Spike, which, given their tumultuous past, seemed a little strange. Although it wasn't outside of the audience's liking, as this was constantly shipped by fans of the show. And with Spike's affections for Buffy, it was at least half warranted. Buffy winds up using Spike and tossing him to the side after continually. It's an unflattering depiction of the series star, who is mostly noble and good-natured. But what makes matters even worse is how Spike took her rejection, thinking that he could reclaim her lost love, which he never truly had. Spike tries to force himself on Buffy in a moment that quite frankly feels far too real for the show that it was on. Watching Buffy fight off monsters of the week and faceless criminals is one thing, but watching her fight off someone who's trying to assault her is just not something that audiences wanted to see. This is an action that sort of ruins Spike. He's done all this developing and moving forward, but this one action sets back 5 seasons of progress. Fans felt that this was far too outside the vampire's actual actions, and far outside good taste. Even Spike actor James Marsden has shared his regrets about the scene.
There was that one episode in Seeing Red, in the bathroom, where Spike almost Buffy. And I would say that's the one that at the time I thought was a mistake. When the script came out, I was really upset. I don't like scenes like that. I don't watch movies with scenes like that in them if I know, if I'm watching a movie and a scene like that comes up, I will leave. If I'm watching television, I will turn it off if I see something like that. It's just too upsetting for me, just because of my own personal, my childhood, frankly. If there's an audition with that kind of thing in it, I don't audition for it. I pass up the job if I'm offered a job with anything close to that. It was the worst day of my professional career. The writers were trying to remind the audience that Spike was not ready for Buffy. He was evil. He had no soul. He was a damn vampire.
It's a move that damages the fan favorite of the series. The Scooby Gang are also negatively impacted by this season as well. Buffy's mere presence is enough to cause turmoil in the team, with Giles noting how serious the magic Willow used is. Giles would leave the series as a regular in the opening of the season, feeling his business in Sunnydale was done and he was without purpose. Something some fans of the show had already felt themselves. Giles was an endless well of knowledge on the supernatural. But after 6 seasons of slaying vampires, stopping demons, and strange third thing, the characters had a much better understanding of the world that they lived in. Buffy didn't really need a watcher, and now that the characters had left high school, the show didn't really need a librarian. Still, while Giles' departure made sense narratively, it did leave a hole in the heart of the show. Anthony Rupert Hall leaving the series truly felt like the end of an era. This was the end of the Buffy you knew, and the beginning of the Buffy you didn't want to know. The show seemed confused about its direction in general, and confused about the characters' placement as well. Dawn probably struggled the most for the rest of the series. I think in this season especially, it's really clear that she was made to be a plot point instead of a person. She served the season prior's plot well, what with not actually being Buffy's sister and instead being some sort of mystical key that was made into a person that was then given to Buffy as a sister for her protection. That was a weird sentence to say. It makes a little bit more sense in context, but honestly not really. She was with purpose in that plot. But past that plot, she's without purpose. She's plotless. Her and Buffy have plenty of heartfelt moments, and getting to see Buffy as a big sister was a welcome new addition to her story. But there really aren't a lot of Dawn-centric episodes, or even B-plot in other episodes. More often than not, she's an obstacle of the episodes to try to get past or work in. I don't know that she made the show better for audiences, but I do know that she made the show harder for writers. The season before ended with Xander popping the question and proposing to Anya, which was a kinda sweet moment. Unfortunately, that moment later becomes bittersweet in Season 6, as it's followed up on halfway through the season when Xander leaves Anya at the altar. It's especially concerning because their relationship never seemed like it was on truly rocky territories, but after seeing a vision of his future and learning how awful his marriage was going to be, Xander gets scared away from the concept of marriage altogether. Except he learns that that's actually a facade put in place by someone seeking revenge on the revenge demon that is his future wife. Or that would be his future wife. Again, yeah, that's a weird sentence to say out loud. Still, even with that revelation, this doesn't change anything for Xander, as he's just now over it, I guess. Following the end of their failed wedding, Anya holds such resentment for Xander that she intentionally sleeps with his worst enemy. Knowing how much he hates Spike, she practically throws herself at the guy, deeply upsetting her former fiancé, and once again, kinda scarring her character. It's not that it's impossible for the Anya character to think these things. She was once a vengeance demon after all. She pretty much has revenge on the brain. But the fact that she saw this through did seem like a little bit of a setback to her character development. The Anya from earlier seasons would absolutely do this, but it felt a little off seeing her do this so late in the game. And one of the show's most famous pairings parts ways. They never actually get back together. There's some flirtations at a future, but that future is dashed later on when Anya's killed off next season in the series finale. Strangely enough, somehow this season was without a big bad. Most of Season 6 centers around the trio, which were previous season punchlines put together. They were minor characters, and when their efforts combined, they still don't feel like a reasonable threat. The trio weren't a mystical threat, but instead just a bunch of dorks Buffy went to high school with. 3 nerds who were looking to take over Sunnydale, who created and weaponized freeze guns and shrink rays. And I don't know how anybody else feels, but to me that was always just a little bit too cartoony. I can accept vampires, werewolves, demons, and Frankenstein men, but when the villain's arsenal starts to look like something out of Family Matters, I think it's time to call it quits. This felt a lot less like a big bad, and a lot more like a parody of one. These weren't the kind of enemies that Buffy would normally come up against, nor were they enemies that anybody was clamoring for her to come up against either. I think it was a little off-putting seeing Jonathan painted in such a negative light. Previously he had been a punchline, but he had mostly had positive interactions with Buffy in the past, including instances where Buffy had saved him, and one occasion where she stopped him from committing suicide. So to see their relationship sour due to Warren's interference just didn't sit right. Warren was quite possibly the show's creepiest character, and that's not by mistake. He was pretty much designed to make audiences want to cringe for a variety of reasons. He only has 2 modes, pathetic and unnerving, and sometimes the 2 meet. The problem here is that Warren is too uncomfortable to want to watch. He does and says gross stuff, and that's really where the character both begins and ends. There's no depth to him. He's as shallow as the other side of the pool. It may seem odd for me to complain about the big bad doing big bad things, but that's not really the problem I have. There were plenty of big bads that were big fun, because the truth of the matter is that evil could be entertaining, even if it shouldn't be. But creepiness? Not so much. Far too much time is devoted to them, when their only place in the story ultimately is to be a catalyst toward creating this season's real antagonist. Because this season's alleged big bad is actually Willow. Oh, excuse me, a dark Willow. All season long, Willow gets heavier and heavier into dark magic. Ultimately, her magic usage begins to tear apart her relationship, having it act as an allegory for drug use and the dark path that could lead one down, even leading to Willow putting Dawn in harm's way. Willow and Tara break up, so that's now 2 of the show's greatest couples ending their time together within the same season. Luckily, after what felt like an eternity that season of will they won't they finally do. And just as the 2 are about to get back together and rekindle the flame, find the happiness they once had, they're torn apart once more. This time by a stray bullet. Following Tara's death, Willow is consumed by sadness. Taken over by a need for vengeance and equipped with seemingly unmatched dark magic, Willow seeks revenge at any cost, no matter who it is that gets in her way. And this felt like such a misuse of this character. While these shows always offered up twists and turns, this was a shocking development that did more to hinder the show than it did to help it. Willow's character was forever stained, giving the lighthearted Scooby a dark side, only blindsided audiences to what it was they loved about the character. She hardly resembled her former self, and those in creative should have noticed the mismatch and creatively rerouted. Ironically enough, this was done perfectly with Allison Hannigan's real-life husband Alexis Densoff on Angel. On Buffy, Wesley was definitely one of the campier characters. A lighthearted goof who was really only there to not be Giles. He was a gag who overstayed his welcome, but through his journey on the accompanying show Angel, he became one of the darker figures these shows ever conjured up. He's a completely different person from the beginning to the end of his story, but that change feels more like a growth. There was enough time and development devoted to his evolution that made his change feel natural. With Willow, her turn to the dark side felt like narrative whiplash. One minute she's the heart of the team, and then the next she's trying to rip the heart out of that very team's chest. I won't say all of Season 6 is bad. As a matter of fact, there are 2 back-to-back episodes that are some of my favorite episodes in the entire series. In Once More with Feeling, a demon's presence makes the town sing and dance as if they were in a musical. It's well written, funny, and even explores the characters' relationships while showcasing how they're all changing over time. The very next episode was Tabula Rosa, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced it. That episode has the entire team catch mystical amnesia, where they struggle to figure out who they are, leading to plenty of laughs between characters forcibly establishing relationships that are just not real, like Spike and Giles thinking that they're father and son. It's another really great episode that has an interesting premise and sees it through. When these episodes are judged on their own merit, they're great, but in correlation to the rest of the season, they stand out. The stories that surround the season are what the problem is. So you can find plenty of enjoyment in these back-to-back bangers, but they don't make up for the narrative dysfunction and disaster that they're encapsulated in. They're just the best of the worst. I won't say all of Season 6 is bad. I will, however, say most of Season 6 is bad. In summary, Season 6 brought its namesake back from the dead, but its reputation and her characterization didn't come back with it. So in summary, Season 6 brought its namesake back from the dead but then annihilated her character, said goodbye to one of its leads, turned another one of its good guys bad, turned another one of its good guys bad, killed another one of its leads, thus canceling out the most successful relationship in the show, and broke up its second most famous pairing sometime before that. All of that happened in Buffy Season 6. And once again, I assure you, I'm really underselling it. I hate to be the one to say this, but Buffy really should have stayed dead. Season 7 didn't fare much better. The season was definitely a step up from the season before it, but when the season before it was ground zero, well, that's really a low bar to set. Season 7 wasn't as insulting as Season 6 was, but it's definitely much more forgettable. Which is saying something considering this was the show's final season. It introduced the idea of potential slayers, having Buffy lead a whole team of up-and-comings. But with so many potentials running around, there was never any time devoted to any one of them specifically. They're all just nameless, faceless background characters. Got a whole slew of Buffy NPCs here for you. It just felt like there was little left to do on the show at this point. The show was working with what it had, but a lot of its credibility was left by the wayside in the aftermath of 2 seasons prior. Having Willow learn to move on from Tara and entering a relationship with the unknown Kennedy, a character that nobody cared about and nobody particularly liked, someone that she had no chemistry with whatsoever, felt like a really sad and subdued note to leave the character off on. Especially after multiple seasons which saw her committed to Tara, who complimented her so well. Xander getting a late-in-life makeover with his eye patch was certainly a choice, though not much else is done with it. The show teases doing something with Dawn, but, ultimately it never comes to fruition, so, just basically what they've done with the character up until this point anyway. Season 7 even had the nerve to introduce a brand new integral character, Principal Wood, the son of the Slayer that Spike killed. What frustrates me the most about this character is that it's well acted and it's relatively interesting. But what should have been a serious season-long story now becomes a minor footnote because it's at the tail end of this show. Stories could be told with this character, but they unfortunately weren't. He would have worked well within the show, but there just wasn't any time for him to do so. Pairing him up with Faith at the end felt rushed at best and forced at worst, but mostly it just comes off as shrug-worthy. It seemed like a creative decision that was made just to end both characters' stories somewhere. Needless to say, this character feels like wasted potential. He was in the right place, but it was at the wrong time. The threat of the first really comes off as another interesting idea and concept, but just kinda meh in execution. It was interesting. A non-corporeal being with the ability to take on the appearance of people past. Yeah, sign me up. That sounds like fun. Let's get into the psychological torture this can come with. But we barely touched the tip of the iceberg on that. A little's done, and it leads to a couple of returns that are nice to see, but ultimately it feels very underutilized. The first henchman being a Bible-thumping Nathan Fillion didn't even do all that much to better circumstances either. And that's Nathan Fillion. If he's not improving your show, then you are without hope. The show literally ruined all of its leads following Season 5. It's not that the creative suddenly felt completely unnatural. It's that the creative direction was not the route most wanted to see the show taken in. Splitting up the show's most famous pairings, killing off beloved series leads without rhyme or reason, short-lived heel turns, new characters with little development, it just didn't work. By continuing on from Season 5, I think the show did itself and its audience a disservice, because it essentially assured that any ending that followed would never be able to compete with this red herring conclusion. It deprived itself of a finale with a sense of finality to it. I don't think Season 6 or 7 did anyone any favors. I would get rid of them if I could. Outside of 2 standout moments of brilliance, I really don't think anything after Season 5 is worth watching. series finale included, though that might be a story for a different day. So if you guys would like to see me tackle the Buffy series finale, let me know in the comment section below by leaving a comment saying, Buffy should have stayed dead.
I am vengeance. I am the night, and that was Infuso. Just remember, if you're not tuning in, then you're missing out.
So, if you like the words that came out of his mouth hole, and you too would like to become a V-generate, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching, nerds!
And if you're not joining the fun, you're in for one bad day. And you know what they say about having one bad day?
Catch him next time. Same bat time. Same bat channel.